This is an original interview between John Lear, Aliens Are Here and They're Not Our Friends, as part of the show On the Record on KLAS TV in Las Vegas in 1987. Interview was conducted by investigative journalist George Knapp. There he looks, a young George Knapp. It was part of a three-part series that explored Lear's controversial views on UFOs and extraterrestrial encounters. Lear made bold claims about government cover-ups and secret collaborations with alien beings, significantly impacting the UFO research community and sparking widespread debate. Chris Lehto, welcome to LehtoFiles. So John Lear was a renowned pilot and UFO researcher whose theories have intrigued and perplexed many. Born in 1942, John was the son of aviation legend Bill Lear, the founder of Learjet. He carved his own path as an accomplished pilot, holding multiple aviation records and flying missions worldwide. However, it was really his foray into UFO research that set him apart. John Lear became a pivotal figure in the UFO community during the 80s and 90s, boldly claiming insider knowledge of government cover-ups and secret extraterrestrial collaborations. His allegations included astonishing claims about hidden alien bases on the Moon and Mars, as well as covert operations involving advanced alien technology. Check out this interview now. Thanks for being here.
To one program, so my guest again this week is UFO researcher, former state Senate candidate, and award-winning pilot John Lear. Mr. Lear, nice to have you here again.
Always a pleasure to be here, George.
To begin with, we have this concept of the people from other planets as little green men. Are they green from what you know? Are they all the same, or we got different kinds of them?
This is a great first question because it seems like now, if you want to discount it, you don't mention the X-Files. That's kind of gone out of style. You say, okay, I'm not talking about little green men. And so I always wondered, where did the little green men come from? Why do people even say that? So I'm happy George brought it up here.
George, there's at least 70 different species, and probably more.
That's amazing. So John Lear says right there that there's at least 70 different species and probably many more, he says. Can you imagine?
But yes, as odd as it sounds, there are little green men. That's not the ones we usually see, though. We see the little gray ones. They're about 4.5 feet tall. And we see the ones that are called the Nordics. They're about 7 feet tall, look like us, but they're invariably blonde hair and blue-eyed. They're one of the species that we have on ice. One of their crashes we recovered.
Okay, so yeah, he comes out of the gate just swinging. So he says there are little green men, but we just don't see them that much. What we see is little gray beings, I guess the normal grays, and then 7 foot tall Nordics. And he says right there is we have a Nordic on ice, right? So that would imply that would be one of the biologics, is one of these Nordic aliens, because we got it from a crash retrieval.
Obviously, with different species, they have different motives. I mean, are there good aliens and bad aliens?
Good
from what
aliens
you know?
and bad aliens, and all kinds of ways and reasons for interacting with us.
And what are some of the reasons? Why would they be here?
Genetic experiments, trying to. There's a misconception here. People think that our space brothers would bring us, good things and teach us how to get rid of all our diseases. And if you stop and think about it, that may not be the best thing, because if you had a society without any disease and everybody starts living 150 years, that creates a lot of problems. So they would not meddle in that way.
I do tend to agree, right? It seems like if you did have aliens coming here, just like Star Trek, one of the prime directives would be not to interfere, right? You're not going to interfere with the basic going-ons of the planet. But he says also there that there's good, bad, and any type in between. If you're doing genetic manipulation, etc., then you could have bad alien species that would interfere for their own benefit, right?
You believe in part that the movies E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, were not entirely just the creative products of some Hollywood director, that maybe there's more to that. Why don't you explain?
They were carefully guided by representatives from MJ12, who is this organization that is in charge of the cover-up, in order to get us ready for the release of the information that there are indeed aliens. And in both those movies, they used small little creatures and in order to get us ready for this release of information.
I have heard this more recently, right? Saying that, especially Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the scenes in there depicting the aliens and the exchange when humans would go with the aliens, right, towards the end of that movie, that somehow he had inside information. Spielberg had inside information. So it's been long in the, at least in the lore of UFO mythology, along with crash retrievals, right? We're hearing the same things that we're hearing now. And George Knapp is involved in that.
To prepare us that the idea of benevolent aliens from outer space are going to help us out.
Unfortunately, they're not so benevolent. So they made probably one of the most disastrous mistakes when E.T. was put out. At that time was before we discovered what I call the double cross or the grand deception. And they were trying to get us used to the benevolent little creatures, but that isn't the case.
Interesting here. So he says that, you know, the title of it is Aliens Are Not Our Friends. He says there is a double cross here. The grand deception is that we've heard there are agreements in place. So maybe our government made agreements, assuming that they were benevolent, made the agreements because we had to. There was no way they had advanced technology anyway. If they were hostile, there was nothing we could do. So best case, we hope that they're benevolent. But John Lear here says that that was not the case, and there was some sort of double cross. And they're in fact not benevolent and not our friends. Interesting.
Why don't you take a couple of minutes? Now, you've done as much research on UFOs as just about anyone, I'd imagine. And if you haven't done it, you know people who have. Where did it all start, and how have we put this picture together of where they came from and why they're here?
Well, the whole thing started in July 2nd, 1947. That was the first crash.
First crash of an alien spaceship.
Of an alien spaceship.
Okay, but now we've heard different numbers, right? Because David Grush says that that was not the first crash. The first crash was actually in 1933 in Italy. And the Nazis actually captured that craft through Mussolini. And then the Allies were able to get the craft when they went into Italy, right? They got word through the actual Vatican that this had happened. They knew about the crash, and so they were able to bring it back. So that's not the case, I guess. It started before that. But that would have been still after 1947 when the Allies found out about it. So maybe that is the beginning.
July 6th is when they recovered it and sent it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. July 7th is when they held the press conference and told the people it was a weather balloon, which the press bought hook, line, and sinker. September of that year, President Truman established MJ12, and the purpose of that was to study the saucers and cover up the existence of UFO.
Okay, so he says it was September of that year. Interesting also, they said Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. You know, that's supposedly where the wreckage from Roswell went. And if you look at the recent shoot-down of the UAP Disclosure Act, that was by Mike Turner. And he's literally the congressional rep from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base area, right? That's the county. That's his congressional district, is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And he is the one congressman, along with Mike Rogers, who receives the most money from defense contractors. Those two are really key in shutting down the main language, eminent domain, the actual public hearing, subpoena power, the board, right? Those were the two guys that shut it down. It's amazing that Wright-Patterson comes back up, right? Mike Turner is the main guy from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. You can't make that stuff up.
We recovered alien bodies from that incident, right?
4 from that particular crash, yes.
And what'd they do with them?
They autopsied them. Dr. Detlef Bronk was the chief surgeon, so to speak. He was the one that named them EBEs. It stands for extraterrestrial biological entities. And we captured 3 live EBEs, They were numbered in their order of capture: EBE1, EBE2, and EBE3.
Where did we capture? Where did this happen?
In different crashes. EBE1 lived with an Air Force colonel between 1949 and 1952. The EBEs are kept in an electromagnetic facility called a YY-2. It was designed by a Dr. Eric Wang, who worked directly for Dr. Kissinger, who has been in this cover-up since the very beginning. The reason they had to create an electromagnetic facility is the fact that the EBEs are so advanced. They're at least 500 million years advanced from us, and probably more. They can move by thought.
Just amazing. This whole thing is amazing, right? They can disappear. It's interesting to find out where the name EBE comes from as well. So John Lear here says, who named them EBEs? They come up with a live EBE was living with an Air Force colonel. Can you imagine just an Air Force colonel? Yeah, I'll have this EBE living with me. No big deal. But they have to basically keep them trapped in some sort of electromagnetic, like Faraday cage, because they can move around simply through thought.
Move by thought.
And they can also disappear. But they can't move by thought through electromagnetic facilities. So they built this facility. There was two, one in Los Alamos and one either at Edwards or up at the test site.
At Groom Lake, Nevada.
At Groom Lake. Now there's still one EBE still living, EBE3, and there is a videotape that eventually is going to be released to the public, and it's an interview with him. As hard as that may sound, as hard as that may be to believe, there is a videotape of an interview with EBE3.
And what is this language that the interviewers are?
I haven't seen the tape, so I don't know. But on this trip I told you I took gathering all this information, a guy in Albuquerque handed me 25 secret CIA memos. And if anything can be humorous in all of this, one of these memos, in the body of the text, it said, by the way, EBE3 wants to see the ocean. We better make the arrangements or he'll disappear again. So while he couldn't get out of this facility, he could make himself disappear and cause him a lot of trouble.
That's amazing. So he says EBE3 is still alive, still living. And does that mean he's still living in 1987? That would be 40 years he's been alive. Interesting also that they have the CIA memos. I've heard about that before, that supposedly EBE can disappear. And if he doesn't see the ocean, then he'll disappear again. Like he's frustrated, like he'll hold his breath like a little kid so he can see the ocean. Could this come out? Could these documents, like he mentions there, secret CIA memos, if it's true, then will the recent disclosure requirements from the trimmed down Disclosure Act, right, will that require these memos to be actually sent forward? Could you imagine the CIA memos going to Congress talking about all this stuff? Supposedly it's required. Can they hide it?
Now, can they exist among us? Is that what you're saying, or do they have to have this special environment?
They have
to be able
special
to
environment, special air. It's my understanding they can only last about 20 minutes in this air.
You were saying also these gray ones are the ones that we see most of the time, and you said that most of that there are a lot of different motives for them being here. The gray ones, what kind of a deal we got going with them? Is that the bunch that you suggest we've made a deal with for military technology?
Well, I think we made a deal with them, and their ultimate, what they want to do is regenerate their own race. Now, apparently they've either had some kind of nuclear accident, or they're on the backside of a evolutionary genetic curve, and they're going downhill instead of uphill. In other words, in the autopsies, of which I have two, we found out that their digestive system is atrophied. They can't eat through their mouth anymore. You know how they eat? Well, these cattle mutilations, they take the hormones and the enzymes from those cattle and they spread it on their skin, and their skin absorbs the nutrients and then excretes the waste back through their skin. And if you read Whitley Strieber's book or listen to him talk, he talks about when he's seen them doing this to their skin, and they're scraping the waste off.
Wow. So John Lear just has an answer for everything right there. Why are they here, and why would they be doing genetic manipulations? Is because we have a clean genetic code, right? Could they be stealing something from us, getting some sort of genetic manipulation because they can't do it? Even with their advanced technology, can you imagine, even though they're, what did he say, millions of years ahead of us in evolution, could they really not fix their own issues, right? They need they need our genetic material to fix their own evolutionary issues. Always seemed kind of like a weak argument to me. If they're that advanced, how come they can't fix their own evolutionary issues? But this is what he says, and that would explain cattle mutilations, is that they've atrophied, and so that's how they actually eat, is they're taking these parts from the cattle and then spreading it on their skin. Wow. Explains everything. He's got all the answers.
Cattle mutilations, there's been a film made about that, and perhaps in a couple of minutes we can take a look at some excerpts of that.
Yeah, Strange Harvest was a good one, but another thing that happened here on March 4th, there was a documentary released on the best UFO photos that have been taken so far, including 1 minute and 38 seconds of videotape. Now, what happened is in November, this guy took these photos, took it into the TV station. They thought it was great, but nobody would believe it. So they spent 3 months checking the validity of the, authenticating the videotape and checking out the credibility of the witness. And when they had it all down, they put out this documentary, 30 minutes. I mean, it's ironclad. They're here. But do you think it got on the network? No, it was just showed locally in Pensacola.
We have some of that, and perhaps when we come back, we can take a look at it. So stay with us for more of On the Record.
Okay, so you imagine that's almost 40 years ago, right? That interview was 1987. How much has really changed since then? It's almost like a time warp. Except now we don't seem to bring out these statements, right? You don't really hear that we actually know what they are, know what they're doing. When I interviewed Leslie Kane, she says she doesn't think anyone really knows what the phenomena is, that it's so complex. If you look at Jacques Vallée, it doesn't seem like such a simple answer, as it's just these gray beings, the simple extraterrestrial aliens. If you look at the orb videos, you know, what could a 20 centimeter across white orb be? Is that the same phenomena as these supposed gray aliens that are trying to fix their own genetic issues, you know, that we made some agreement with and they double-crossed us? Initially, we thought they were benevolent, made agreements with them, maybe traded with them, and then they double-crossed us to try and fix their own genetic evolution by stealing our genetics. Well, unfortunately, Lear died peaceful passing March 29, 2022 at his home in Nevada. Thanks to George Knapp, man. He's still making videos, still investigating this. Have we made any leeway? It sounds like the UAP Disclosure Act could possibly upend some of these CIA memos, if they exist, right? John Lear mentions MJ12. Could it be possible that that exists? Could the timeline that John Lear said, that we made agreements in September 1947, just a few months after the Roswell, could that have happened? And then look at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, right? Is it just a coincidence, just a random coincidence that Mike Turner, the representative from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, happens to be one of the key figures to shoot down the UAP Disclosure Act? And now we're round 2. Check out my coverage of the new UAP Transparency Act and the Senate Intelligence Act. Very interesting wording in there. Eminent domain, public hearings, and a board to actually find out what all these records are and disclose it to the populace. We have Chuck Schumer saying that the government has much more information on UAPs than it's letting on. So will we find out? This finally be the year after almost 40 years from this interview. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps and it's free. Consider subscribing to get future notifications of when I release videos. And you might like this video recommended by YouTube just for you. If you want to support the channel, join these great people over here, get exclusive bonus content, then click this button here, patreon.com/Chris Lehto, or become a YouTube member. If you want to continue the discussion, go to UAP Society Discord. Links are all in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.